All right, now we're going to pick up where we left off yesterday. Yesterday, we finished creating all of the networking. So basically, a quick recap is we installed the systems, we got them clustered, installed the WAN IP addresses, or rather created the uplinks, assigned the public IP addresses to those uplinks, and we created the networking that we're going to use today. Now, yesterday, we also connected the AP to the VSZ, and we can see that there wasn't, so if I go to network and wireless, we can see that there will be a LAN 04 WLAN that's created. We can see that here. Now, it's broadcasting on our AP right now, and if I connect to that, then I'll be connected to this remote location. Basically, the traffic is tunneling from the AP here back to the VSZ, which is actually in another state. So the next thing that we're going to do is basically start to do the configuration that's going to build out our tiered service levels. So to do that, the first thing that I'm going to do is let's talk about the policy dashboard really quick. So everything on the RxG is policy driven. So what we're looking at here is the policy dashboard or the policy graph. What we have in the middle here are the different policies. So there's a couple that were here by default when we first installed the system, which was this default policy and the web server DDoS abusers policy as well. The other two policies that we have here, the ICX and VSZ, those were created when we automatically when we created the infrastructure devices, basically under network and wired. That's where we took control of the ICX switch and that created the policy there. And then the VSZ, of course, was under network and wireless. So the next thing that we're going to do or talk about now is the ways that we can identify devices on the network. And that's what we see on the left here. Now, really right now we only have one type of group over on the left. It's the IP group, but we can do this by IP group, MAC address that it has, or an account group that the some tier of service that the end user has purchased. We can also change a user's identity, and when we change the user's identity, we're basically changing the group that they're associated with. And when we do that, we can also change the end user's experience. So the experience is what's listed over here on the right, and we haven't built any of that out yet. But in this default policy here, there is an example of how you can get moved to a different policy based on some behavior that your device has done. In this case, what we have configured here is this web server DDoS prevention, which is a log hit trigger. So what it's looking at is it's looking at the web server logs, and if a device is hitting that web server 300 times in a 5-minute window, we're moving them into quarantine essentially for 15 minutes, and that's what's represented here. Now this web server DDoS abusers, so if I'm in the default policy and I hit the web server a bunch of times, over 300 times in 5 minutes, my identity is going to change. I'm going to move from, or not really move, I'll still have this default group identity right now, but I'll also become a member of this web server DDoS abusers IP group. And when that happens, my experience changes. So I'm in the default policy. I'm allowed access to the internet because there's no splash portal. I'm not allowed to talk outside of my subnet. There's a web cache on here, but there's also 100% bandwidth queue. If I hit that web server, I attack that web server, I'm going to become a member of this web server DDoS abusers. It will take precedence because it has a 2 here, and the default is a 0 for precedence. So I will become a member of this web server DDoS abusers policy. And when that happens, it basically the only enforcement there is this web server DDoS abusers block all, and that's just a application filter, basically a port filter. It's just dropping all traffic. So if I attack the web server, I get put in timeout essentially. Now I'm going to go back to identities, or I'm going to go to identities and group, not to the dashboard. I want to go to identities and groups. And from here, I'm going to create a couple more groups. So I'm going to create a couple of IP groups. Basically, I'm going to create an IP group for our onboarding network, into our account network as well. I'm not going to create any MAC groups. MAC groups can be used to bypass devices, which is really the incorrect thing to do. If you have something like a headless device, a lot of times people will, like a printer or an Xbox, people will create a MAC group that just allows access, and they'll put the MAC address of that system into the MAC group, and then it'll just be allowed to access the internet. However, if you're using accounts, a better way to do that is to actually go and edit the account, and then you can add the MAC address there, and then the device, whether it's an Xbox or a printer, whatever it happens to be, will also be a member of the account, and the end user will have access to that on the net. We'll be able to see the other devices in their account, because when they're in their account, they're going to be in their own unique subnet and their own unique VLAN. So I'm not going to create any MAC groups. And then as far as the account groups go, when we need to have an account group essentially for every tier of service we want to offer. So we might do something like bronze, silver, and gold, maybe. So I'm going to start by creating the IP groups. And this is going to be my onboarding account group. I'm going to leave the priority at 2. I'm going to change, we don't have a policy, so I haven't created any policies yet, so I can't assign a policy to this unless I want to use one of the ones that's already existing, which I do not. So I'm going to leave policy blank for right now. The only other thing I need to do is select the addresses. So in this case, this is our onboarding account group. So not an account group, onboarding IP group. I'm going to change that. This is our onboarding IP group, and I'm going to select our CC1 and CC2 onboarding addresses. I don't need to select anything else here. I don't really have anything else to select. So I'm just going to hit create. So we're still missing part of that configuration, which is the policy, which we'll make here shortly. So I'm going to create another IP group. This one's going to be my account IP group. Again, I'm going to leave the priority of this one at 2 as well. And I'm not going to select a policy. Now, the purpose of this account IP group is going to be, essentially, we're going to tie this account IP group maybe into our lowest tier of service. Because the only way that you can get into this account IP group is that if the device is known, if the MAC address is in an account. So if you have an IP address from this network space, then you should be allowed out onto the internet. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna just tie this account IP group to one of our tiers of service that we're gonna offer. And so what's gonna happen is when a device returns to the network, a known device, what can sometimes happen is the device will return, it connects to the network. There's a brief delay while the back end logs the device in. And so while that happens, it doesn't actually have access to the internet. And so it can cause the device to get redirected to the portal. And they'll just get a message saying that the device is already logged in. But we can create this account IP group, tie it to one of our account tiers of service, and have a landing portal associated with it. Then the system can automatically log the device in the back, in the background. And so once that happens, they'll be moved into their appropriate tier of service. But before that happens, they're not going to get any message about already being logged in. They're not going to get redirected to the portal at all. And that's the purpose of this particular IP group. So I'm going to go ahead and create it because, again, I don't have a policy to associate with it yet. So I'm just going to click create. Again, I'm not creating a MAC group, but I am going to create a couple of account groups. So I'm actually just going to do free. And we're going to run into the same issue here where I don't have a policy to assign to this, and that's okay. We need to make those, and then we'll add the policy to our actual groups. The other thing that we can do here is if we're using a DPSK or dynamic or pre-shared key, we can specify the length of the PSK, and also we can disable security on here. Generally not a good idea. Basically, it prevents people from trying to create PSKs that are the same. And I believe it's a 40% match, so if a password is close, they don't have to get it exact. So otherwise, if they pick the exact same password and that's the only time that we said, oh, that's not going to work, then they'd be able to just use that to get online because they know it's a valid password. But in this case, if a password is similar to somebody else's password, it won't let them create it, and it will just say that it's a an invalid PSK. So I've given this a name of free. I'm just going to hit create. And I'm going to do that again. So this is going to be, just going to do basic. Again, just giving it a name, hitting create. And then I'll also make a premium account. Again, just going to hit create. So now I have the different ways that I can, I've got my IP groups to identify the devices based on what. Actually, I did forget one thing here. So I'm going to go and edit my account IP group because I did not select the IP addresses when I did that. So I'm going to select the CC1 and CC2 account addresses and then go ahead and update that. So now what I have is my two IP groups, my account and onboarding IP group. I still need policies for those. I have my free, basic, and premium account groups, and these are going to be, again, we still need the policies for those too. The other thing that we can do is create, if we just want to make a button that somebody can just click to get connected, we can do that as well by going to identities, and there's a couple of different ways to do that, but the way we're going to do it here is go to identities and shared credentials. And I'm going to create a shared credential group. Now, the name doesn't matter. I'm just going to call this one free. Now, on our portal, we have code that's looking for this credential field. And if that credential field is either has the word free, lowercase free in it, or there is no credential in there at all, then what it does is it changes dynamically what is displayed on the portal, the captive portal. If I have a credential other than free or blank in here, so if I put in something like free Wi-Fi, then what that would mean is that when the end user gets redirected to the portal, there'll be a field where they can enter in a credential. And if they enter in a valid credential, then they'll gain access to the internet. In this case, I don't want them to have to type anything in. I just want it to be a button that they'll click. So I'm just going to get rid of the credential and leave that blank. Again, I don't have the policy yet, so I'm going to leave that unselected. We could do time. I might want to offer like maybe 1 free hour. And I don't really care about how much bandwidth to use. So I'm going to select unlimited for download and upload quota, but I could specify something like 1 and 1, right? So then what's going to happen is this credential will stop working, or not really stop working, but they'll get redirected back to the portal. They'll lose access either after 1 hour has elapsed, or they've downloaded 1 gigabyte of data, or they've uploaded 1 gig of data. Now in this case, I don't want to do that. I just want to give them an hour time, and I don't care about how much data they're using. If you do intend to create a shared credential that, with the purpose of basically somebody being able to just click the button and get connected, we need to make sure that we adjust when it expires, because by default this is only good for 1 week, and we don't want that. So we actually want to change this. We could do something like 2099, and that'll just make sure that it doesn't stop working. We could also set this up to where it's only valid on certain days of the week. So maybe if this is a business or something like that, maybe we don't want to, maybe we're closed on the weekend, and so we don't want to provide access there. We could uncheck these, and then this credential won't work during the weekend, just during the work days. In this case, I'm going to leave them all selected. Now this one doesn't end, so we don't need any kind of recurring or anything like that. The next option here would be the splash portal, and this would be determining on what portal is this particular credential valid, and don't have any splash portals yet, so I can't select that. But under session control, I can specify how many simultaneous users do I want to have. So that's how many devices can be connected right now with this shared credential. Right now, it's set to unlimited. If I was to set it to 1, then only 1 device would be able to be online at any given time using this credential. So if somebody else wanted to get a free hour, they would have to wait for this session to end. Obviously, I don't want to do that, so I'm going to just leave this blank and make sure unlimited is checked. The intercession is how much time the device has to wait after they've used this credential. So in this case, with it set to 0, after the 1 hour has elapsed, they'll get redirected back to the portal, and then they can click the button again and basically gain access, basically get another free hour of time. What I don't want to do, if I set this to 1 hour, this timer starts at the same time that the internet, as soon as they gain access, right? So setting it to 1 and we're giving them 1 hour, this is essentially the same as being set to 0. Because when this timer expires, this intercession timer expires is the same time that their internet access will drop. And so it won't actually do anything. If we wanted to offer 1 free hour a day, we might do something like, the intercession to 24 hours. But what that means that if somebody clicks the button at 3 p.m. to get connected, they wouldn't be able to get the free hour until 3 p.m. the next day. So if we wanted to be nice, we could maybe set that to something like 16 hours. That way, if they're there at 3 p.m., they can get the free hour. If they come back the next day in the morning, they don't have to wait till 3 p.m. to get another free hour. And then lastly is the automatic login. And if that is checked, if the device were to leave before the amount of time had expired and then come back, it would automatically log the device in. They could basically connect to the network and they would get logged in automatically. They wouldn't need to click the button to gain another hour of access. So I'm going to go and hit create here. So that'll create our shared credential. We can also use, if we want to offer free service, we can also create, if we wanted to gather information, right, we could create survey questions. And that could be something like, maybe asking for an email address, right? So we could say, please enter your email address. And then the display text, this is what will just be displayed in the box. And we can check that end user must respond in order to submit form. Basically makes it a required field. And again, normally what we would do then is select the splash or the landing portal where the survey questions would be displayed. But we don't have that configuration yet, so I'm just going to hit create. Oh, and it didn't oh, yeah, okay. I don't need to put that. The question's going to be in the box. It's going to say, please enter your email address. So now that I have this, now I can actually go and start to create some policies. So I'm going to go to Policies and Captive Portal. And we're just going to create some policies. So I'm going to hit create at the top. And this first one is going to be our pre-auth policy. So this will be the policy that the end user basically redirects the devices back to the splash portal when they first get connected. So here we want to have a splash portal selected, although we don't have a splash portal, so I can't do that yet. So actually, since we're going to be making some policies, and one of the things that we need to do is to create or be able to select the splash or landing portal, I'll go ahead and cancel this for right now. Let's go ahead and create a splash and a landing portal really quick. So what a splash portal does is that if you're in a policy that has a splash portal attached to it, then it's basically going to redirect you to the portal where you can then authenticate. So I'm just going to call this splash. I'm not going to use any portal mods. Portal mods basically allow you to change the look and feel of the portal. Now the RxG portal is going to be set to default. We haven't created any custom portals on here, so this is just going to use the default portal. This remote URL, this is if you have a remote portal. This is so this is not like a site that you want to redirect the user to after they've logged in or authenticated or anything like that. This is just if you're using a remote portal. The next thing is this whitelist, and that's important. This allows you to whitelist certain sites, and it can be whatever you want. But a good example of something you might want to whitelist, well, one is the certificate validation host, which you can already see here. And that just basically allows devices to reach out and verify the validity of the certificates that are installed on the system. This primarily affects iPhones and iOS devices. If you're going to be doing, there's different ways that you can take payments on the system, and one of those is PayPal. If you are going to use PayPal, well, what that does is when the user pays with PayPal, they click the PayPal button, they get redirected off to PayPal. And if it's not whitelisted, they can't get redirected, so they'll never be able to make payment. So we have PayPal WAN target built in by default. And I'm not actually going to use PayPal on here, but I will select it as I will whitelist it so that if we did set that up, we could get to PayPal. The next thing we have is the automatic login. I'm going to leave that as Mac and the portal mode set to create session only. We could change this to disabled. We don't want that. And then basically disabled, it just wouldn't log the device in automatically, at least in the background. If we were to hit the portal, then it would log us in. It basically would, based on the Mac, it would create the session. And we also have some other options. We could do Mac and cookie or Mac or cookie. Where you might do Mac or cookie is if a devices are going to be switching from maybe wired to wireless, because the MAC address changes when you do that. But if it's got the cookie on there, then it can log the device in. So I'm going to leave this on Mac, create session only. I'm going to leave the password reset method on secret. Now we do have the ability to, you'll notice this SMS gateway, right? So we can do the password reset via email or even SMS or a combination of email or SMS. Now, if you are going to use SMS or you want to use SMS, it does require a SMS gateway, and that would be Twilio. Right now, that's the only one that's supported on the system at the moment. I'm going to leave this at secret. Basically, they was part of setting up the account. There's some questions and they select the answers to, and then if they provide the correct answers, they'll be able to reset their password. Now here, provisioning, we don't have the policy yet, so I'm not going to tie this portal to anything. We do have the shared credential group. That's going to be here, and we want that here because that's basically allows that shared credential that we created, that free shared credential that we created, to be used here. And then we can select the survey questions, which I have here, and I'll leave that one selected. And then we can do TOS. So if we want to do a TOS requirement, we can change this from disabled to inline. Inline basically displays it on the same page. If we do redirect, it'll redirect it to a different page. It'll open up a different view basically in the portal and display the TOS. So in this case, I'll just do inline so we can see what that looks like. And the last thing is if we want to require that the end users accept cookies, and this is a requirement for some places. Primarily, I think this started in the UK, I believe. I'm going to leave that unchecked, and I'm just going to hit create. And I'm going to do the same thing for the landing portal. I'm just going to create a new landing portal. I'm going to call it landing. And same thing here. I'm going to use the default portal. Here we don't have a whitelist. Instead, we have a blacklist. I don't need to blacklist anything. So I'm going to leave that blank. Next, we have automatic login. Now, the portal mode, I'm going to change that to be Mac or cookie. And then the background mode, I'm going to change that to be Mac. And we need that because this is by turning on this background mode to Mac, that's going to allow that account IP group that we created earlier to work the way we want, meaning that they'll get it, a device will, the known device will join the network. It'll be in our account IP group, and that way it'll have internet access right away. And then while the system logs it in the background, after it logs it in the background, it will then get moved to the correct policy. And if we didn't have this background mode selected, then what would happen is the device would connect. It would have internet access because it's got an IP address from that account IP group, so it would have internet access. It just would never log in. So if they were, maybe we have that set to the free, but they're a premium user, they would not be in the correct policy because the portal wouldn't log them in. And then here we can set session limit or idle timeout, grace time. This what the settings are right now is fine, especially for like an MDU. Now we do have a redirect URL here. So this here, if we wanted to redirect the end user somewhere after they've logged in, this is where we would do it. So if we wanted to redirect them to, maybe we want to redirect them to the RGNet's website, we could do that by just entering that here. I'll go ahead and leave that there. And then provisioning, what policies should this be a member of? Well, we don't have any. Now, survey question, we're going to uncheck that. We don't need that on the landing portal. We're asking that before they sign in with our free credential. So I'm going to uncheck it from the landing portal. So now I'll create this. Now that we have our splash and our landing portal, now we can start to create some of our policies. So I'll go ahead and create new. This is going to be our pre-auth policy. Now, because this is the pre-auth, we want to have a splash portal. What we can't do is something like this because these things are mutually exclusive. If I try to create this as it is, it's going to give me an error, right? Because I can't have a splash and a landing portal configured. So I'm going to change, this is the pre-auth, so I want it to redirect. I want to use the splash portal, so I'm just going to change this to be the landing portal, or sorry, going to get rid of the landing portal to where there's just a splash portal selected. And because this is our onboarding, essentially our onboarding policy, our pre-auth policy, I want to select the onboarding IP group, and that's the only thing that I want to select here. And then I'm just going to hit create. So that now we have our pre-auth policy, and then we just need a policy for our free, basic, and premium. So I'm just going to call this one free policy. This one will get a landing portal because if they're in this, we want them to have access. I think for this one, I'll also tie the account IP group to it, and the free account group and the free shared credentials as well. So in this case, we actually have 3 things selected, and the other ones we're just going to have 1. So create this, create another policy. This is going to be basic policy. This should also have a landing portal, and it should have our basic account group selected. And then we need one more, which is our premium policy. And again, same thing. We're going to select the landing portal and our premium account group, and then I'm going to hit create. So now we have our policies created. So the next thing that we can do is we still don't have a way, like if I click on policies right now, right now the only policy that we would be able to become a member of right now is this free policy, because we don't have a way to buy access into the basic or premium policy. And so that's the next thing that we need to do. But before we do that, we're going to configure our radius configuration. The reason why I waited till now to do it is as part of that radius configuration, we need to have our account, or rather not our account groups, but our policies. We need policies that we can select. So let's create our radius configuration really quick, and then we'll create the other configuration that's necessary for an end user to be able to purchase access into one of these policies that we've created. So what I'm going to do next is go to services and radius. Now, in order for this to work, in order for something to be able to talk to the radius server, the RxG's radius server, it has to have the secret, of course, configured in it, but it also has to be in a policy or a WAN target that allows, basically, if it's not in one of these policies or in a WAN target, then it's just going to be ignored, even if it has the secret configured in it. Now, we don't actually need to change any of these radius server options, because the thing that's going to be communicating with the RxG's radius server is the VSZ. And as we can see from the policies here, our VSZ is already selected. So it is already allowed to talk to the radius server. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new radius server realm. This one's going to be our onboarding realm. The rank can be 0. The realm admission logic, this can be set to policy or attribute pattern. Logic must succeed. This is or. We could also make it such that it's and, right? But in this case, we just want or. We're actually not going to be matching against any policies here. Instead, because we don't know what policy the device belongs to, if they're in this onboarding realm, this is for unknown devices, right? So the only policy that they have really be a member of is the default policy, but that's not what we want to match against. Instead, what we want to match against is the SSID of the WLAN that they're connecting to. And for that, we select under attribute patterns. I'm going to select this called station ID. And in the pattern, I can type in a pattern. So in this case, this would match any SSID that contains lab 4 in it. And I could be more specific. In this case, this matches for what I want to do. In fact, the SSID that's already broadcasting is lab 04. So I should change this from lab 4 to lab 04. The next thing we need to do is determine how the dynamic VLANs are going to work here. So in this case, what we want to do is the sharing is not going to be per account. At this point, they don't have an account, right? This is an unknown device. So what we want to do is set this to be per device. And the VLANs that we want to assign, because this is our onboarding realm, we want those to be the onboarding VLANs. We are reusing the VLANs because if you recall, we're putting 4 subnets, basically 4 devices per VLAN if necessary. And the way that this system works is it'll put a device in its own unique VLAN until those VLANs are full. Then it will start reusing the VLANs. It doesn't fill up one and then move on to the next one. Then here we can determine, if we want this to be a static. So, or we can do a timeout. In this case, I'm going to leave it at 60 minutes. That's fine. We could also set it to just expire at logout so that as soon as the device logs out, it just frees up that VLAN. And then the VLANs per called station, this we needed to have unlimited because we don't know where the VLANs are going to be. It depends on who's connected to what AP. And then here I'm going to select the infrastructure device, in this case the VSZ, right? And what that does is if the device is changing its VLAN, basically they go through the process of signing up for an account. Having the infrastructure device selected is what will actually generate the COA to disconnect the device and have it reconnected so it gets the proper VLAN. I don't need to change anything. I don't have anything to select under the proxy servers. I don't need to do anything with the proxy options. And then our behavior here, here's where we can select which radius attributes we're using. If we wanted to use the Ruckus DPSK, then we would select that here. Now for this particular SSID, I don't want to do that. This one is, there's 2 ways that we could do this. We could use a single SSID, but then that requires the user in that case would connect with a known password and then go through the process of signing up the account. And then once they've done that, then they would select their own unique PSK. But then the user would have to basically forget the network and then reconnect it before they could use their new password. If we set up 2 SSIDs, then the user can connect to one, basically for the sign up process. They go through that process, and then they would connect to the second SSID where they could then use their dynamic pre-shared key to get connected. So we're not going to use it here. And then what I'm going to do is just hit create. I don't need to change anything else. So I'm going to create. This is going to be our onboarding network. Now we need to do the next thing, which is the next realm, which is our account realm. So I'm going to click create new. This is going to be our account realm. And then here I can specify a rank. This one I want it to be higher than the previous rank, right? Now here I'm not going to be matching against the SSID. Instead, what I want to match off of is the policy that the end user's device is in. So in this case, that would be the basic, free, and premium policy. So I'll go ahead and select those here. Now here, the sharing should be per account because at this point we know who, once you're in this is the account. You've already signed up for an account. You can have multiple devices. So we want the sharing to be per account. The VLANs we want are the CC1 and CC2 account VLANs. Here we want to uncheck this reuse because we don't want to reuse VLANs across accounts. If we checked this, then it would be possible for more than one account to end up in a VLAN, and that's what we don't want. So we're going to uncheck that. And then everything else, we do want to check the infrastructure device. for the VSZ. And I will go ahead and check the Ruckus DPSK here, because we'll set up a DPSK WLAN. So I'll go ahead and create this. Now what should happen right now is if I come up here and I connect to the Lab 04 Wi-Fi, okay, so it gave me an IP address of 192.168.1.134. So that's actually something that's not on this particular network. So I'm not sure where that's coming from. I'm going to go ahead and connect back to this so we can take a look at that. And I know what the problem is. If we go to network and wireless, the WLAN that we're connecting to is just open. Basically, there's not open. It's using WPA2, but what it's not doing is it's not utilizing the radius, right? So what we need to do is change that. We can still leave it on WPA2, but we want to do MAC authentication bypass. And in this case, we want to make sure that it's tunneled. It is. And I don't need to select any of the VLANs here. Actually, that's not true. Should be the onboarding VLANs, because that's what we want to get when we connect to this. So I'm going to hit update. Now what that should do is reconfigure the the WLAN on the VSE, and we can see that it's doing that now. Sync attempt in progress. So we'll give that, oh, and it looks like it failed for some reason. So let's go in here and then do synchronize configuration. Let's see what it tells us. Okay, so it looks like it actually did it this time. So now let's try connecting to that Lab 04 SSID again. So the network can, oh, I wonder, because it's, yeah, all right. So we need to just wait a minute. But I do want to check one other thing really quick, actually. Actually, we should be okay. So let's try this now. So now it's showing back up. And so now we've joined, and remember our onboard, now we've got an IP address in that onboarding network, and it's actually opened up the captive browser to redirect us to the portal. And normally it wouldn't take that long for this portal to show up. It's just, this is a remote portal at this point because I'm I'm connected to an AP, and it's, all my traffic's being tunneled away. So here now we can see I can create an account, but we don't actually have that configured yet. So the only thing we can do is become a member of this free access. And so if I try to hit connect right now, I have to fill out my my email address. So if I put that in here, I can then hit connect. Oh, but I also need to select the terms of service. And if I click that, then I can see what the TOS is. So if I check that box and hit connect, I'll then be online and I'll have 1 hour of free time. But I am going to go ahead and close it, and it redirected us to the RGNet's website, which is what I had configured in the landing portal. But I'm going to go ahead and connect back to the local Wi-Fi here for the time being. So now we've confirmed that our onboarding network works. Now we can configure the rest of the configuration we need for somebody to be able to purchase access, basically purchase a plan. So to do that, what we would do is go to billing, And we're going to go to gateways first, because first we're going to configure out the merchant so that we have a way to take money. Then we'll define the plans, basically what we're going to sell. So here, there's really kind of three kinds of merchants. One is PMS, not really a merchant, but it does post charges to property management service, so something like a hotel, for example. But what we want to use is a merchant, and there's two types of merchants. There's what are called direct gateways, and that's going to be something like authorize.net, for example. And then offsite gateway would be PayPal, for example. In this case, we want to do a direct gateway, so I'm just going to leave authorize.net here. Authorize.net, you can go to, I believe it's developer.authorize.net. You can click on the Hello World here, so start with Hello World, and then do create sandbox account. And you can fill this out, and they'll give you a username and password that you can use for your own authorize.net sandbox account. I'm just going to call this auth.net sandbox. I am going to check this store credit cards button or box. That's going to allow me to do recurring billing. Without that, I cannot do recurring billing. I don't need an offsite gateway. My username, I believe, is that, and then the password, I don't recall what my password is. So I will need to come back and put that in. This obviously will not work right now, but the other thing that you would need to do is to supply, or make sure you check the test mode checkbox. So I'll go ahead and create this, and then let me see if I can find. Oh, actually, you know what? I might have. No, I do not. Actually, I might have taken a screenshot of it. That's not it. Ah, there we are. That's not ideal because I can't copy and paste off of this, but that is okay. All right, let's go ahead and edit our merchant again. There we go. So now I'll go ahead and update this. Now I'll have the correct username and password there. Okay, so now I have my merchant created, and that's all that's required to actually create the merchant. Now I can make my usage plans. And to do that, we're going to go to billing and plans. Now, a usage plan consists of a quota plan, a time plan, those are required, and then optionally a plan add-on. So now, if we wanted to sell, I'm going to start by creating a time plan. But if I wanted to sell 1 day of time, this is not where I would create that. A time plan, you can think of this as the old like cell phone plans, right? This is a pool of minutes. So so what that means is if I was offering 1 day in this time plan, 24 hours, if I had 3 devices connected to my account, I could burn through that 24 hours in just 8 hours, right? Because I'd have 3 devices all drawing from the same pool of minutes. So I'm going to call this one unlimited. I'm going to set the price to 0. The price of a usage plan is the price of the time plan plus the quota plan plus anything that's in the plan add-on plus whatever price is defined in the usage plan itself. For the sake of simplicity, I usually make these time plans with just a price of 0, and then the time is going to be unlimited. If we were not using unlimited time and we were offering some amount of minutes per month maybe, then we could check this rollover if we wanted to, and then any unused time would roll over into the next month, just like those old cell phone plans. So I'll go ahead and create this time plan. And then the next thing I'm going to do is create the quota plan. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Obviously, quota is still very much used today, right? This is if I wanted to sell some amount of bandwidth. For the purpose of this, I'm just going to I'm going to do 0, and this is going to be unlimited. And we could do the same thing here, where we could set this rollover to be, if we were selling quota, any unused quota at the end of the month could be rolled over into the next month. So I'll go ahead and create that. So now we've got our time plan and our quota plan. And a plan add-on is not required, but it allows you to create plans. So it used to be one of the big advantages to a plan add-on, especially in like the hospitality space with like hotels, is one of the things that we've added now is this account lifetime. And that's important because before, when a guest arrived at a hotel, if the hotel wanted to be able to sell that guest a plan that was for their length of stay, let's say they had people that stayed up to 1 week, right? They would have to create a 1-day plan, a 2-day, 3-day, 4-day, 5-day, 6-day, 7-day plan. So that's 7 plans that they would have to create just for the length of stay. And then the guest, when they connect, they would be presented with the plans that fit within the amount of time that they were staying. So if the guest was staying for 3 nights, they would get they would see the plans that fall within that. They wouldn't get the 7-day plan to purchase. And so now imagine you wanted to do other things like create different tiers of service. So for every tier of service, you'd have to create those 7 plans, right? So then you'd end up with, if you had 3 tiers of service, you'd end up with something like 21 plans. And we can, using these plan add-ons, we could just do it with 3 plans in that case. But we can also do things like allow the end user to purchase a dedicated IP address with a plan add-on, or a static IP, or any of the other things that you see here. For the purpose of this, I'm not gonna. Maybe we'll select this dedicated IP, right? So we'll create this. And we'll let them purchase a dedicated IP. And it's not going to be included with the plan, and it's not a one-time charge. We could do that, but in this case, we want them to select, and we want them to pay for that each month, right? So now here we're going to do a fixed quantity. If we could put it, we'll make a slider, even though we don't have the IP addresses to actually give a guest or somebody 10 IP addresses. We'll still put that in here just so we can see what that looks like. And then we can do a fixed price. Now that would be, we wouldn't want to do that here, because if we put something like not 105, if we put like $5 in here for the price, then that means whether they got 1 IP or 10, they're only going to be paying that $5. So instead what we want to do is price per quantity, and we'll set that at 5. So now create this. So now we have our time plan, we have a quota plan, and we also have a plan add-on. So now I will create a usage plan. Now, everything that we've done up to this point is, aside from the plan add-on there, all the configuration that we've done is not customer facing, right? So they don't see the names of the policies or the other things that we've created. In this case, though, usage plans, this is what's presented to the end user. So we need to be mindful of what we name things here. So for this, this is just free. This is our free plan. Now here we could give a description if we wanted to. We could fill out like this free plan includes, we could put 5 megabits per second. And maybe if there was a quota, we could put that in here too. So this is just what we can use to describe the plan to the end users. Now the provisioning here for the account group, I want to change that to free. So then the next thing is, where can this plan be purchased? From what portals can it be purchased? We want it to be available from the splash and the landing. If we uncheck the landing, then what would happen is the first time the user connected, they would be presented with this free plan. And then when that ran out, they would be redirected to the portal, but they would be logged in at that point. They would be on the landing side. They just wouldn't have any usage on their account. But what that would mean then is that they would not be able to purchase the free plan again. They would then have to buy either the basic or the premium. I'll be nice and I'll leave that selected here. I want to use automatic login. That way when devices leave the network and come back, they don't get redirected back to the portal. They can just connect. Because we're going to be using DPSK, we want to check this automatic provision. And then the last thing is this lock devices, and that just prevents a device or a user from creating another account if the device is already in an account. Now, for our free users here, I'm just going to set this to be 1 day. We'll give them 1 day, and we need to make sure that we uncheck this usage never expires. Now, when we set the relative lifetime here to 1 day, it doesn't matter if we have 1 device or 3 devices. They're all gonna. It will last 1 day. So if we purchase at 3 p.m. today, it will expire 3 p.m. tomorrow. And then an absolute lifetime, you can just specify the date and the time where that ends. And then, of course, by checking do not set lifetime, the account would it would just keep going indefinitely until an admin, did something to change that. And so the next section we have is the included plan features. Here, I want to leave quota and time as unlimited. So max sessions, this is how many devices can be connected. Now this is our free users. We might leave this at 1, right? Allow them to create an account. They can only have 1 device on at a time. I'm going to be a little bit nicer. Maybe I'll set that to 5. Now the max devices is how many MAC addresses we will remember on the account. So if I left this just as it is right now, it means that the end user could have 5 devices connected, but only one of those devices, the first device that created the account, would be saved to the account. And that would be the only one that it would automatically log in. So usually max devices is at least going to match what's there for max sessions. But in this case, I'm just going to set it to unlimited. I don't care how many MAC addresses we have saved to the account. But I want to limit the number of devices they can have connected at once. In this case, it's going to be 5. Max party guests. This is a feature that allows, remember, each account gets its own VLAN. This max party guest is a feature that allows the end users from the portal to create a LAN party, basically create a virtual party essentially, and then invite other devices into that party. And if a device joins that party, then what it does is it's allowed to temporarily join that account's VLAN. So now they're all in the same VLAN, thus they're all in the same LAN, and now they can communicate with each other. And then the next thing we have is the max dedicated IP. So this is how many public IP addresses the end user would be able to basically get with this plan in the form of a BINAT. Now in this system here, we only have enough IP addresses for a single BINAT, and that's on CC2. And I don't want to give those away, so these free users are definitely just going to be max dedicated IPs are going to be set to 0. We could the other thing we could do is set, if we wanted to, we could do the dedicated IPs are static, so that if a device was, or an account was assigned a dedicated IP, it would always get the same IP address. And we could check this VTAs are static. That would mean that at the time the account signs up, it gets assigned to VLAN, and it would just stick with that VLAN. Now, the advantage to that is if you don't have that checked, most of the time devices are going to be connected and that VLAN is not really going to change. But if that VLAN did change, what the end user might notice is now that the subnet that they're in is different. Right? So it won't be the same private IP address space that they get. I'm not going to worry about that here. I'm just going to leave that unchecked. UPnP permitted, I'll leave that checked, but it's really not going to work in this instance because we don't have the public IP addresses to assign to every account, and there's only so many ports, right? So if I had 5 Xboxes on the going out through a single IP address, the 6th one is not gonna get an open NAT. It'll still work. It'll connect to the internet. It'll just have a strict NAT type. And I don't want to do any plan add-ons here. This is a free account, so I'm going to set that to 0. I'll leave the auth.net sandbox merchant checked here. It doesn't need to be checked here, but I'm going to leave it checked just in case I decide to add any plan add-ons to here that the free users will be able to purchase, because then it will require some way for them to pay for that. So I'll leave that set, even though it's not going to be used right now. We can also check prorate credit. In this case, it won't do anything because this is a free account. But let's say we had a user sign up for our slower tier of service, like our basic tier of service, and they decided that that's not fast enough for them, and so they immediately go and purchase the premium plan. Well, if I don't have this prorate credit checked, then they're going to be paying full price for that upgrade. But let's say they've only been connected for an hour, and let's say we're offering on the basic and premium, it's for a month, right? They've only been connected for an hour, so they've barely used any of the time on the account, essentially, right? So then if they decide they want to upgrade with prorate credit, they would just get a vast majority of what they just paid for that basic plan would be applied to the premium plan. And of course, as time goes on, if they did it towards let's say this was good for a month, if they did it towards the end of the month, then the amount of credit that they would get would be less. I'm not going to check that here because this is a free account. Now I could set the interval here. I'm not going to set the interval. I don't want it to reoccur. If I could set this to be right now, I could set this to be a day because that's how much time we're offering. And then every day that free plan would just automatically re-up. If we were selling more time, like a month, then the date here, this would be, if we set this to be 1, then it would be the first of the month is when everybody would get billed. If we don't check anything, or if we don't put anything in here and we leave the relative box checked, then what's going to happen is if the user signs up on the 5th of a month, then that's going to be when we bill them. If it's the 27th of the month, then that will be their billing date. We can also specify the charge, retry grace time, basically the amount of time we wait before we try to bill the card again, and then we can specify the maximum number of attempts. We can also allow the account to still remain online even if they have not paid, if it's failed, by checking this permit unpaid AR. And then we can specify these penalties, like a late fee or disconnect plus reconnect fee, and that's down here. And that's under the billing notifications and penalties, so we can adjust the prices for all of these. We also have a billing notification warning. I don't need it on here, but by default, it sends out an email 2 days before the bill date, so they get a warning that it's coming. And that would be the billing notification. The next thing that we can do is account validation. So this would be we can basically, they sign up an account, and especially if it's a free account, which is really the only time I would use this. If somebody was giving me money for the account, then I wouldn't force them to do this. But what this does is, if I turn on account validation, and then I'm asking for information, like let's say an email address or a phone number, right? If they provide a invalid email or an invalid phone number, they can't get the email or the SMS message. So they won't be able to get the code that, basically what happens is if this is enabled, after they've gone through the sign-up process, they'll get to another page that they have to enter a code, and the code either comes from the email or SMS, and they enter that, and that's what completes the sign-up process. I'm just going to leave this set to none. The grace time, like I said, that's like 15 minutes. That would give them time, in this case, like 15 minutes time before, where the account would be active before it shut off. They have 15 minutes to validate the code. Basically, it gives them time to check their email and get the code and then enter it. So this is our free usage plan. I'll go ahead and create that. We just need a basic and a premium one. So I'll create another one. This will be our basic plan. Again, we could give a description. I'm not going to give it a description. I'm going to change the account group to be basic. The splash and landing portal, I want this to be purchasable on both of those. Now here, this is where I might do something like let's do 1 month. Now here, these people are giving me money. Now we're handing them out /24s if they're in an account, right? So We could set unlimited here, but if we didn't want to set unlimited, we could just specify. We put something like 250. We could do 253, but we'll just 250, nice even number. We'll just leave it there. And max devices we'll leave at unlimited. Max party guests, maybe because these people are giving us money, we'll say you can have 10 max party guests on here. And then the max dedicated IPs, that'll still be set to 0, and we won't worry about the dedicated IP. They do have the ability to purchase a dedicated IP address via the plan add-on. And to make sure that can be done, we just need to make sure that's selected here under the available plan options. Now, when they go to purchase this basic plan, the plan add-on will be available. So now I need to come up with a base price. We'll say $25 a month. It's actually not that much, but it's fine. And we will do the prorate credit. The interval, this one we want to set it to be, monthly. The date can be relative. Basically, the expiration is never. Basically, it'll keep recurring until the end user cancels the account. And then we have a charge retry grace time, which is 1 day. And then we'll try that over the course of 5 attempts. And I'm not going to do account validation here because they're paying us money. I really don't care about their email address or their phone number in this case. I need to create one more usage plan, and this is going to be our, I think it was premium. This will be our premium plan. The account group needs to be premium. We want it to be available on the splash and landing portal. Automatic login, all that. We want to still leave checked. The relative lifetime, again, is going to be 1 month. That's fine. We'll leave this exactly where it is. Maybe we give these people, though, we say they can have 20 people in their party. Or 20 devices. And again, we'll give them the option to purchase a dedicated IP address. And then we need to set a price for this one, and we'll do, we'll just do 50. And then we'll make sure that prorate credit is checked. And we don't need to change anything with the recurrence or the account validation. So now we'll go ahead and create that. So right now, if I come up and look at this policy dashboard, we have, and before I do that, let's go to instruments and device sessions. What I want to do is, because I had logged in previously with the shared credential, I want to make sure that my login session is not active. So I'm going to go to instruments and device sessions here, and we can see right here, here's that login that I had. I'm going to delete. And then let's go ahead and click on this policy dashboard. So right now we've got some more, we're starting to get some more stuff here. So now we actually have a way, we can buy our way into the basic or the premium policy right now. There's really no reason to do that right now because we'd be perfectly fine with a free account because we'd be in this free policy, and the enforcement for all 3 of these right now is the same. Basically, we just get a landing portal. But now if I go and I connect to Lab 4 again, I'll get redirected to the portal once again. Only this time, if I click the create login, now I actually have the ability to purchase an account. I can select which plan I want to buy. I got the free, basic, or premium plan. And I'm not going to do this yet, but now everything is in place for us to be able to purchase a plan. And so I'm going to go ahead and just get cancel, and I'm going to go back to the other Wi-Fi, other SSID. So the next thing that I need to do here is actually, let's go to Let's go to services, no, network and wireless. Let's create our DPSK WLAN. So I'm gonna create this and I'll call it lab 04 DPSK. Access point zone, I want to select the lab zone. I want to select the AP profile. And of course the VSZ, there's only one controller, so I don't need to change that. The SSID, I'll call this lab 04-DPSK. The encryption, we want to set to, we'll set to WPA2. And then this MAC authentication bypass, we want to change that to multiple PSK. Now, when you're using multiple PSK, we don't actually put a pre-shared key here because it's dynamic. We don't know what it is. I do want to check the tunnel here. I don't need to change anything else. I do want to make sure that the account VLANs are selected, and they are. So now I'm going to hit create. And then what that's going to do is now it's going to sync with our VSZ, and in fact then if we go to lab 04C, remember that's the HTTP virtual host that we configured. And so now I can go to network and I can go to wireless LANs, and now we can see that it's created this other WLAN. And if I hit configuration for that, we can see exactly what it did. So when it created this, it set it up. The method is open, and then it's using WPA2. AES, this is disabled. The 802.11 is disabled. And then the dynamic PSK is set to external. And then if we scroll down here, now we can see that here's the authentication server. And if we click on the edit button, we can see what it's doing. So it's talking back to the RxG on 172.16.0.1. It's got the port in there. It's got our shared secret. And so this is what's going to point. So now if we connect, we go through the process and create an account, which let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to reconnect back to lab 04. And we can see that I got a 10.0.0.42 address. Now here I'm going to create an account. I'm going to put in my email address. Super secret password. This is our PSK. We'll do 1, 2, 3. Not anyway. And for this, I will purchase my premium plan. Go ahead and put in our fake credit card. Give it a, let's set that out, and we'll just do 1, 2, 3. Accept the terms, and then click purchase. And this is going to purchase against our fake, not really fake, it is a legit authorized.net, but it's not actually doing the billing, right? And then we can see it's redirected me to the site. Now, if I click on other networks, now I can see this lab 04 DPSK. And I think, what did I put my password for? I think it was super secret password, right? So I put super secret password. I can then click join. And now I've connected, and now we can see I've got an address in 10.1.4.2. So if I come back over here and I go to network and LAN, so what was that IP address again? That was 10.1.4.2. So basically I'm in this, I'm on CC1. And I've been assigned a VLAN. So if I come up here, I can go to Instruments and Interface Assignments. So I can see where I reconnected. Now I have a VLAN tag of 2004, and I'm in the account network, and I connected using that DPSK that I created. And I can go to Identities and Accounts, and I can edit my account here, and we'll see it's got my MacBook there, and then here's our pre-shared key, and so we can change that from here. I could, if I wanted to change this, I could edit it. The other thing that is built in, if I go to Services and DNS, we can see we've got some DNS records here, one of which is y.fi. If I type in y.fi, it should redirect me back to the portal, and that's what it's done. The other way that we could get to the portal is by typing in lab04-cc1.net lab.ninja/portal/default, which we don't want to do that. That's too much. So from here, I can see different things about my account. So here's the dashboard showing me my bandwidth usage. I can also, how much time I have remaining, right? I have 1 month and 23 hours. The devices that are on my account. I can add a device here by the MAC address. I can, if I could also do port forwards here if I had an IP address dedicated, like a BINET, on my account, which I do not. The other thing I can do, this is where I can create those LAN parties. I can also change my wireless password right here. I could change it, and that'll change my PSK, my DPSK. I'm not going to change that. And then also have my profile. Here's where I can change the different things on my account, like my password, address. Billing is where I can update my my card information. It also gives me my billing history, basically my receipts, invoices, things. And then I can also see the usage for the different devices on my account. There's really not going to be anything here right now because I only just recently connected, but we can see our top destination hosts, we can see our weekly traffic, daily logins, connections, all kinds of things. And we can also upgrade our plan from here. Now in this case, I've already purchased the premium plan, so really it would be a downgrade to either the free or the basic plan. The only difference right now, as far as there's really no point in buying any of the different things other than free right now, because they are all the same, right? So if I go back to policies, they're all going to be the same. So now we can start to do some things to differentiate them. And so for the purpose of this video, we're just showing what might be done in a typical like MDU, right? So we've already talked about captive portal. If we wanted to do content filtering, let's put some content filtering on our free users. If we wanted to do that, there's a couple of things we could do. If we wanted to maintain our own list, we could just create a content filter list, and then we could put in whatever we wanted here. That could be maybe we want to block, Bing.com. We could do that. We could put that in here. I don't want to manage a list, so instead I'm going to use a remote content filter list. So I'm just going to click Create New. There's different ones. I'm going to call this one UT1 Adult Filter Content List. So I'm going to change this to be UT1. UT1 does not require a username and password. I'll leave the frequency set to daily, so that means every day I'm going to go and download this list, or the system will download the list. So I'll hit Create, and we just need to wait not a couple minutes, but just a minute or so. So now if I edit, nope, don't have it quite yet. So what's going to happen is once it's downloaded the list, like let me hit refresh here. Once it downloads the list, we will have a big list of categories is what will happen. And then we can select what we want out of those categories. In this case, I've called this one my adult content filter. So that's what I'll be selecting. So now it's got the list. I can drag this to make it bigger. And here I want to do adult There might be a couple other ones in here, maybe. I'm not gonna look too hard. Do dating as well. Maybe lingerie. Okay, that's good enough. So I'll update this. Now that's still not gonna do anything right now. The next thing that I would need to do to make sure that this gets applied and enforced to our end users is to create a new content filter. And I'll call this adult, or maybe I'll call this one UT1 adult content filter. Now this works by DNS. I'm going to leave the block return name does not exist. So if somebody tries to go to an adult, a site with adult content, it'll just return that the name doesn't exist. We have some other options here too. We could redirect them back to the portal if we wanted to, and in that case we could display a view. In this case it would be the content filter view. We could change that so we could have different views for different types of content that are blocked. But I'm going to leave this just return name does not exist. We can intercept HTTP, we can intercept SSL. Of course, if we intercept SSL, that's basically a man-in-the-middle attack. So then if we don't have a certificate installed on those devices, then every page that the user goes to is just going to, they're going to get the certificate warning. We could also do intercept SSL TLS. Oh, that's what I just said, which of course will break the SSL, man-in-the-middle attack. We could also do a blanket block where we basically just block everything except for what we specify is allowed. We can also force safe search. If we had a YouTube educational ID, we could put that in here. We can detect tunnels if we wanted to, and even block access to invalid HTTPS websites. Right? Now here I want to make sure I have my remote list. And then finally, the last thing we have to do is select which policies we want to apply this to. And in this case, I want to do that free policy. So I'll go ahead and hit create. So now, if I come back up to our policies dashboard, now there's a little bit of a distinction between the different policies. On our free policy, for example, we have this content filter and a landing portal. So now we have a reason to buy the premium and the basic policy if we don't want to have any content filtered. The next policy element we'll talk about here, is so interstitial redirection. This not as useful as it once was, and that's just because everything is HTTPS now. This doesn't. It's not going to work unless you intercept the SSL, and that's of course again a man-in-the-middle attack. So we're not going to do any configuration there. Packet filters. This would be, we already have an example of a packet filter here, so I'm not going to create one, and that's this web server DDoS abusers. Basically what it's doing is if we wind up in a policy that has this application filter on it, it's just blocking all of the ports. Basically it's just not going to let us go anywhere. But what we should do is edit our subnet filter and just put this on our free, basic, and premium policy. Just, we don't want them talking outside of their subnet. They are in their own VLAN as well. So we've got that packet forwards. So packet filters are like our firewall options. These are our packet forwards. We created one of these previously. That was our RxG forward, and that's what allows our AP to be able to talk to the VSZ in this case. It also, as a consequence of that, it also does allow us to access the GUI of the VSZ just by typing. We can put in 47.48.73.217:8443, and we'll get the login for the VSZ. Transit traffic forward would be something like maybe if we wanted, instead of maybe blocking port 25, we wanted to redirect that to our own mail appliance that we have. And then device port forwards, those we can create them here. We can create them manually, but typically these will get created by the. So I could do something like this, and I could create the device port forward. But usually, what we'll see is these will get created automatically by UPnP. We won't talk about payload rewriting. That's another thing that used to be really cool, but now does not work because of HTTPS, unless again you install the certificates or you break SSL. Persistent caching, so this is where we would have our we can basically configure how the cache works. I'm not going to actually assign cache to any of these, but we'll look at it really quick. So if we edit this, we can see that we can adjust the maximum file size for the cache. We can clear the cache from here. We can also specify a prefetch limit. If we do specify a prefetch limit, just be aware that that prefetch limit does the opposite of what a cache is usually intended for, which is to reduce bandwidth usage. Prefetch will actually increase it, right? Because what it's doing is some device goes to a website, then this will try to pre-download all of those links that are off of there so that when the end user clicks on them, if they click on them, they'll load quicker. But again, it does the opposite of what cache is typically used for, which is to reduce the amount of bandwidth being used. The next, I do want to configure some traffic shaping and some uplink control. So let's start with traffic shaping. Now it is possible for a policy to have more than one bandwidth queue associated with it. So in this case, I'm going to create a new bandwidth queue. This is going to be for our free policy, so I'll do free. Maybe we'll do 5 megabits per second per device. That's what we'll call it. This part's pretty straightforward. We do 5 and 5. That will give us 5 megabits up, 5 megabits down. I can do a burst if I want, so I might do something like this. Then I have to specify, then I have to specify a time. So in this case, we'll set a burst of 5,000 milliseconds. So that means 5 seconds. For the first 5 seconds of any connection, they'll get 20 megabits per second. I'm not going to do a guarantee. Now, there are some different ways that you can do shaping, which is down here, device account, group, and policy. We want to do this, though, if we're using a burst, it has to be at the device level. If I wanted to do a guarantee, I could do it on any of these levels, but typically it's not done at the device or the account level because it's really easy to oversubscribe your bandwidth if you do that. So normally it's done by the group or the policy level. Now I'm going to leave this at device. If I specify a WAN target or an application being a list of ports or ports and a WAN target, but if I select anything in either the WAN targets or the application, then it narrows the scope of this bandwidth queue to what is defined within that WAN target or application. So if I was to do this, then this queue would only affect things going to Cambridge. And I don't want that, so I'm going to leave that unchecked. And then I do want to, this was our free policy, so I'll go ahead and check that there. Now, these are our free users and they're not giving us money. So I might want to add another bandwidth queue here, and that would be free. Maybe we'll do 100 Mbps per policy. So now I can come in here, put 100, select policy, and then do the free policy. I'm going to go ahead and create this and we'll refresh the page here. And then what we're going to see is now on our free policy, we have this right here at the policy level. We have a 100 megabit per second policy. And then here we have this at the device level, right? Device level, we have 5 megabits per device. So what that means is, let me click back on this policies dashboard. So if I'm looking at the free policy, I've got 2 bandwidth queues here. So this 5 megabit per second is per device, right? So each device can get up to 5 megabits, but because we have this 100 megabits per policy bandwidth queue, then that means this free policy, the bandwidth is shared between not our free shared credential users and our account group. So if we had 20 devices on the network that are in the free accounts and they were all downloading 5 megabits per second, then they would basically be hitting the cap of the policy. So if more devices got in there, then those other devices will need to start slowing down potentially if everybody's trying to download everything. So basically there's a cap at 2 levels. No device in the free policy can go above 5 megabits per second, and then all of the free users combined cannot go above 100 megabits per second. So now I'm going to go back up to policies and traffic shaping. And we need to create at least 2 more bandwidth queues, one for our basic and then our premium. So we'll give our basic, maybe we give them 25 Mbps. Actually, we'll do that a little bit better. We'll do 100 Mbps. Oh, this is a policy. That's not what I wanted. I'm going to edit. I'm going to create a new bandwidth queue here, and this will be 100, or we'll do basic 100 Mbps. And this will mean that every account is sharing this 100 megabits. So we'll do 100, 100. We're not going to give them a burst. It's already pretty fast. I'm not going to do any filtering. So the only thing we want to do here is change the shaping to account, because we want this account to share this 100 megabits. And then we're going to select our basic policy. And I'm going to hit create. And we're going to create 1 more of these. And this is going to be our premium. We'll do 250 Mbps per account. And here, just put in 250, 250. Change this to be per account, and then select our premium policy here, and then hit create. So now if I go and take a look at the policy dashboard again, now we can see that we've got our premium policy. It's got 250 megabits per second. Our basic policy has 100 megabits per second. And then our free policy has 100 megabits per policy, but also 5 megabits per device. And it also has a content filter on there as well. And the last thing that I'm going to configure for this demonstration is the uplink control. And what this does is, if we have more than one uplink, which we do, we've got each one of our CC1 and CC2 both have 2 uplinks. Before I can use a link control, like if I create this right now, the first thing it's going to try to do is load balance. But if I try to create this, it's going to give me a bunch of errors because I don't have any ping targets defined. So what I want to do is come down here to ping targets. I'm going to edit this. I need to unassociate this node from it. And then I can select all of my uplinks there and then just create, and then do the same thing here. Generally speaking, you don't want to use these Google DNS for your ping targets. You can, but you should create your own ping target. So one thing that you should not use as a ping target is the default gateway of the uplink, because there's definitely situations where the uplink will be down, but it still allows traffic. Or not traffic. You can still ping the gateway, but you can't go beyond the gateway. So now I can create some link controls. Now by default, what it wants to do is create a load balance, and I don't want to do that. What I want to do in this case is we're going to pretend that we've got 2 different types of uplink, which technically we do. Our CC1 and CC2 uplink, these 2 here. Remember, these are actually configured in a way that's not officially supported, right? They're just getting a private IP address from a DHCP server. But we'll pretend that's our lower quality link. The CC1 and CC2, these are actually a public uplink. This is a cable connection. Maybe for the purpose of this, we'll pretend our cable connection is actually a fiber connection, and then our other uplinks are the cable connection. Now, if I wanted to do load balance, I could just click create right as it is right now, and that's because the speed of all of our uplinks are the same. You can use, if one of our uplinks was half the speed, or maybe let's say our CC1 and CC2 uplink were both 100 megabits per second, then what I would do is I would edit the CC1 and CC2 public uplink, and I would change that weight from a 1 to a 9, basically saying for every 9 users we're putting on the public uplink, we're going to put 1 on the other one, and that's how it would do the load balancing. Now here I don't want to do load balancing. What I want to do is I want to set it up to where our basic and premium fiber, right? So I'm going to uncheck this. So now I only have our public uplink selected. I'm not going to select any WAN targets or anything like that. I want to remove all of these, and I just want to have the basic and premium policy. So what this is saying is that if you've given us money, we're going to allow your traffic to go out our fiber connection, and then our free users are all going to go out of the cable connection. Now, we could, the other thing we could do too is we can get more granular than that, because we can select WAN targets or applications here, and then only the things defined within that WAN target will go out this uplink. So we could create a WAN target that's for, say, Netflix and all the streaming services, and we could force that traffic to go over our cable uplink where we don't care about latency, right? So in this case, I'm not going to get really granular with it. I'm just going to push all of our basic and premium users onto what we're calling our fiber connection, and I'll create another one of these, which is our free users, and they're going to be on the CC1 and CC2 uplink, and then here I just select the free users, and now anybody who's in that free policy, all of their traffic will go out that the other uplink. We can also do things like a backup, so I could do basic premium backup, and now here I can select the other 2 uplinks, check the backup, and then do our basic and our premium policy. That way, if the fiber connection goes down for some reason, then their traffic will then go out the backup uplink. And so now we've configured our link controls. So at this point, we have a fully working MDU site. It's got a basic configuration on it right now, but it is fully functional. We can connect to it. We connect using our own DPSKs that we create during sign up, and then we can connect to the SSID using the pre-shared key that we selected, and we'll get connected. And any device that we connect, this is especially useful for things like headless devices, right? So anything like a printer, Xbox, things like that, we can connect to the SSID, put in our pre-shared key, and we don't have to worry about getting redirected to the portal. The device just becomes a member of the account. So I'll go to identities and accounts, and what I'll do is I'll connect. So you can see there's only one device connected here right now, right? I'll refresh this. I can connect my phone to this and use my super secret password. And then I should be able to connect. And then the device should automatically be provisioned, and we can see it there. Now it just showed up. Here's my phone. Now it's connected to our network. And so just like that, if I had a printer or an Xbox, I could connect to the SSID and it will connect right up. Well, hopefully this has been useful. This was kind of a quick run through of how to configure it from start to scratch with a very basic configuration for an MDU. Thank you.